let's talk about rules. In filmmaking, there's a set of core principles that can guide us to make visually stunning and emotionally impactful shots. They aren't strict laws, but more like guidelines that help us communicate our story visually. Today, we'll go through 5 fundamental rules every filmmaker should know. The golden ratio, leading lines, rule of thirds, Hitchcock rule, and the 180-degree rule. We'll explore how they work, why they're important, and when you might want to break them. Let's dive in. First, we have Hitchcock rule. It states that the size of an object in the frame should equal its importance in the story at that moment. Named after the legendary director, this rule emphasizes that the size of an object in your frame should match its importance in the story. If something's crucial to the plot, make it prominent in your frame. If not, keep it smaller or in the background. This rule helps convey meaning through visuals without needing extra dialogue. Imagine a scene where a character receives a mysterious letter. Following the Hitchcock rule, you'd want to give that letter a close-up or make it dominate the frame for a moment. This subtly tells the viewer that the letter is important without needing dialogue. This rule is a brilliant tool for visual storytelling, but it's most effective when used with intention. For example, if a character is overwhelmed or feels lost, you might break this rule by showing them in a large, empty frame, making them appear small and insignificant. This contrast can add layers to your storytelling, showing the character's emotional state visually rather than spelling it out. Next, we have good old rule of thirds, one of the most universal composition rules in photography and filmmaking. Picture your frame divided into 9 equal parts with 2 vertical and 2 horizontal lines. Key subjects or focal points are often placed along these lines or at their intersections, making the composition feel balanced and natural. For example, in interviews or close-up shots, placing the subject's eye line along the upper third of the frame is a classic approach. In landscape scenes, positioning the horizon along one of these lines rather than dead center can make the shot feel more dynamic. One reason the rule of thirds works so well is that it mimics how our eyes naturally scan a scene. When we position elements off-center, it creates a sense of movement or flow. But as powerful as it is, this rule isn't always the right choice. In scenes meant to convey balance or stillness, like a symmetrical shot, you might want to ignore it and go for a central composition instead. Very good example is Wes Anderson's Grand Budapest Hotel, where the director is using a lot of symmetry. The key is knowing when this rule serves your story, and when breaking it creates a stronger visual impact. Now let's talk about 180-degree rule. This is one of the most important rules for maintaining spatial continuity in your scenes. Picture an imaginary line between 2 characters in a scene, often called the axis of action. Once you establish this line, you should keep the camera on one side of it to avoid disorienting the viewer. If you cross over, you risk flipping the screen direction, which can confuse the audience. For example, in a conversation scene, character A should stay on the left side of the screen and character B on the right. If you suddenly switch the camera angle across the line, they appear to have swapped positions, breaking the visual consistency and potentially confusing the audience. However, like every rule, the 180-degree rule can be broken when done deliberately. Filmmakers often break it during intense moments, like fight scenes, to add a sense of chaos or disorientation. But in general, this rule helps ground the viewer in the scene, creating a stable, easy-to-follow visual flow. Next up, leading lines. This technique helps to guide the viewer's eye through the frame toward a specific point. Think about roads, rivers, fences, or even the direction of a character's gaze. Leading lines create a sense of depth and movement, drawing the audience into the shot and giving them a sense of perspective. For example, in an establishing shot of a city, streets can serve as leading lines that direct the eye toward a central building. In dialogue scenes, the angle of the characters' bodies, or the lines created by furniture, can also serve as subtle leading lines. When you want to highlight tension, use lines that converge at the subject. intensifying the focus on them. Leading lines are fantastic for creating a sense of immersion, especially in action or adventure genres. However, if you're aiming for a more chaotic or abstract look, breaking away from leading lines can add an element of visual surprise. Golden ratio. This concept has been around for centuries, found everywhere from nature to ancient architecture. In filmmaking, it's used to create compositions that feel balanced and natural. Imagine overlaying a spiraling curve on your frame. This spiral can guide where the viewer's eye naturally lands. It's also called Fibonacci spiral. When setting up a shot, try placing your subject along the curve, particularly where the spiral narrows, or position key elements in the scene at points where the lines intersect. This draws the viewer's attention subtly, without making the composition feel forced. For instance, in a landscape shot, you could position the horizon line along the spiral, with a key subject like a person or tree at the focal point. But remember, not every shot needs to follow the golden ratio. It's one of many tools to help create visually harmonious scenes. So, those are 5 filmmaking rules that can help you create more engaging and visually appealing shots. These guidelines can serve as a foundation to improve your composition and storytelling. Remember, rules are there to be understood and then broken thoughtfully. So, experiment, find your style, and let these rules guide you toward the shots that best tell your story. Thank you for watching, and I see you in the next one.